On a cool spring morning in April, two identical girls were born into a world that would never fully understand them. June and Jennifer Gibbons entered the world in a military hospital in Aden, Yemen, where their father was stationed with the British Royal Air Force. The Gibbons family, already blessed with two older siblings, embraced the new additions with joy. Shortly after their birth, the family relocated to Haverfordwest, a small town in Wales. It was here that the unusual nature of June and Jennifer's bond began to surface. While most twins share an unspoken connection, June and Jennifer seemed to operate on an entirely different level. From infancy, they were inseparable, rarely seen apart. They mirrored each other's movements and emotions, creating a silent rhythm that excluded everyone else, even their parents. But their connection wasn't merely close, it was impenetrable. As they grew, the twins displayed a curious reluctance to interact with others. When addressed, they would simply look at each other, communicating silently with their eyes. This unbreakable bond, while fascinating, cast a shadow over their ability to form relationships with anyone outside their twinship. Little did the world know that this connection would define their lives, for better or worse, as their shared world began to grow darker and more isolating with each passing year. From the time they were toddlers, June and Jennifer were united in their own mysterious world. Their connection went far beyond the typical closeness of twins. The girls developed a private language, an incomprehensible mix of rapid speech and rhythmic sounds that no one could decode. Family members, teachers, and even language experts were baffled by the complexity of their communication. It wasn't just gibberish, it seemed like a structured, deliberate language born out of their shared existence. This secret tongue acted as both a bridge and a barrier. It connected the twins in a way no one else could replicate, but it also alienated them from their family and the outside world. Attempts to separate them, whether in school or at home, were met with silent defiance. If one was forced to leave the other's side, they would both shut down entirely, refusing to speak, eat, or interact until reunited. Their pact was unspoken yet absolute. The twins were a single unit, and any attempt to disrupt that unity was met with resistance. As the years passed, it became clear that their bond wasn't just a form of companionship. It was a fortress, shielding them from the world they refused to engage with. But what drove them to isolate themselves so completely? Was it an instinctive need for protection in a world that didn't understand them? Or was it the beginning of a darker, more complex dynamic, one where their love and dependence on each other became both their sanctuary and their curse? As their behavior became more extreme, those around them began to wonder. Was their bond simply the result of an extraordinary twinship, or was it something far more enigmatic and unsettling? When June and Jennifer Gibbons reached school age, their peculiar silence became impossible to ignore. Enrolled in a local Welsh primary school, the twins stood out not only for their identical appearances, but also for their unsettling muteness. Teachers described their presence as unnerving. They would sit side by side, their eyes fixed on one another, as if silently conspiring in a world no one else could enter. Attempts to engage them in lessons or play were met with blank stares or subtle, synchronized movements. Their refusal to speak to anyone outside their twinship baffled both educators and classmates. While other children laughed and shouted in the playground, June and Jennifer moved in eerie silence like shadows gliding across the schoolyard. They ignored taunts, insults, and even attempts at kindness. The few times they were observed whispering to each other, their language was rapid and indecipherable, alienating them further from their peers. In a desperate attempt to break their silence, teachers decided to separate the twins into different classes, hoping the forced independence might encourage them to communicate. The result was catastrophic. Both girls became catatonic, refusing to respond to any stimuli. They would sit motionless, their heads bowed and bodies rigid, as if the separation had shattered their very sense of self. This reaction raised unsettling questions. Was their bond truly a source of mutual comfort, or had it evolved into something more controlling? Were the twins protecting each other from the outside world, or were they imprisoning one another in a fortress of their own making? Concerned by the twins' extreme behavior, doctors and psychologists began to take an interest in their case. The Gibbons family, already at their wits' end, agreed to let specialists intervene. What followed were years of fruitless sessions with professionals who were as mystified as the family. One psychologist noted that the twins displayed a dual dependency so profound that it bordered on pathological. During individual sessions, neither June nor Jennifer would utter a single word. Their eyes remained downcast, their expressions unreadable. However, when they were placed together, their demeanor would change entirely. They would whisper rapidly in their private language, occasionally bursting into quiet laughter or exchanging glances that seemed to convey entire conversations. Even their parents struggled to understand the depth of their connection. While June and Jennifer adored their two older siblings, they never displayed the same level of affection or communication with them. Their father described the twins as living in their own little bubble, while their mother admitted feeling helpless and excluded from their insular world. As their silence persisted, the twins' behavior began to draw darker interpretations. Some doctors theorized that one twin exerted dominance over the other, creating a dynamic of control and submission. Others argued that their bond was an extreme coping mechanism born out of the isolation they experienced as one of the few black families in their predominantly white Welsh community. But as the twins grew older, their silence became more troubling and their connection more intense. Were June and Jennifer united against a world they couldn't trust, or were they trapped in a cycle of mutual dependency that neither could escape? The answers remained elusive, as the twins refused to let anyone into their secretive and increasingly impenetrable world. By the time June and Jennifer Gibbons entered their teenage years, their silent world had evolved into something more troubling. What had once been a peculiar quirk now seemed like an impenetrable fortress, cutting them off entirely from the rest of society. The twins avoided even the most casual interactions with neighbors, classmates, or extended family. In the small, tight-knit community of Haverfordwest, their behavior did not go unnoticed. While other teenagers explored friendships, hobbies, and independence, June and Jennifer retreated further into their shared bubble. They stopped attending social gatherings and walked home from school in synchronized silence, their heads bowed to avoid eye contact with anyone. Even their older siblings found it impossible to breach their growing wall of isolation. This self-imposed exile was no longer a refuge, it had become a prison. Their lack of communication with the outside world began to foster resentment, frustration, and a sense of being misunderstood. Teachers who once showed compassion now viewed the twins as deliberately defiant, while classmates mocked them for their odd, silent partnership. But what troubled their parents most was the way June and Jennifer seemed to grow restless and agitated in their isolation. They spent hours locked in their room, whispering in their secret language or glaring at each other in tense, silent confrontations. The bond that once seemed unshakable now showed cracks, hinting at an undercurrent of rivalry and unease. The question that haunted everyone was simple. How long could they exist in this self-contained bubble before it collapsed under the weight of their shared emotions? As their frustration and isolation grew, June and Jennifer found a new outlet for their voices, writing. Locked away from the world, the twins began creating stories that offered a chilling glimpse into their inner worlds. They filled notebooks with tales that were as imaginative as they were unsettling. The twins' stories often revolved around characters who mirrored their own lives, loners, outsiders, and pairs bound by a bond that was both profound and destructive. But these narratives also ventured into dark and violent territory. Their writings were steeped in themes of betrayal, jealousy, and obsession, often culminating in acts of revenge or gruesome endings. One of Jennifer's stories told the tale of a boy who was seduced by his teacher and then pushed into madness when she betrayed him. June wrote of a young woman driven to extreme measures to escape her controlling husband. The violence in their stories was vivid, almost cathartic, as if the twins were pouring their frustrations and fears onto the page. Their parents, upon discovering these stories, were both disturbed and intrigued. Was this merely creative expression, or were the twins channeling their suppressed anger and resentment into their writing? The lines between imagination and reality began to blur when the twins started keeping journals filled with cryptic entries about their own lives. Jennifer wrote that she felt June wanted her to die, while June admitted feeling trapped by Jennifer's presence. These writings revealed a growing darkness in their bond, hinting that their shared isolation was no longer just a defense mechanism, but a dangerous breeding ground for conflict. As their stories became more twisted, their real-world behavior began to shift as well. It was as if the act of writing had unlocked something inside them, something that could not be contained. This newfound form of expression offered a troubling prelude to the actions that would soon follow. Their fictional worlds were no longer enough to satisfy their need for release, and the boundary between their imaginations and reality began to dissolve. As June and Jennifer Gibbons reached their late teens, their isolation and suppressed emotions began to manifest in troubling ways. Their writing, once a dark but harmless outlet, no longer sufficed to channel their growing frustration with the world and with each other. The twins began venturing out at night, not to socialize or explore, but to disrupt and destroy. Their initial forays into delinquency were relatively minor, shoplifting small items from local stores, vandalizing property, and sneaking into places they weren't allowed. But their actions quickly escalated. Fueled by a shared sense of rebellion and a craving for the thrill of destruction, the twins moved on to more dangerous crimes. One night, they set their sights on an abandoned structure in town. After dousing it with gasoline, they lit a match and stood together, silently watching the flames consume the building. Witnesses later described seeing two shadowy figures standing motionless in the flickering light of the fire, their faces expressionless as the inferno raged. The arson marked a turning point. It was no longer about petty mischief, but about domination over a world that had rejected them. What drove the twins to such extremes? Was it a desperate attempt to break free from their isolation, or a reflection of the anger and resentment festering within their bond? Even more chilling was the apparent lack of remorse. When questioned by their family about their nocturnal activities, the twins offered no explanation. Their silence, as always, spoke volumes, leaving those around them to wonder what darkness truly motivated their actions. Their crimes did not go unnoticed. After a string of incidents that left a trail of evidence, local authorities began piecing together the puzzle. It wasn't long before the law caught up with June and Jennifer. The twins were arrested, their home searched, and the full extent of their activities brought to light. Despite their silence, the evidence against them was overwhelming. Witnesses recalled seeing the twins near the sites of their crimes, and forensic evidence linked them directly to the acts of arson and theft. Their refusal to speak only added to the eerie aura surrounding their case, as investigators tried to unravel what seemed like a shared but silent rebellion against society. During their trial, the courtroom was gripped by the unsettling dynamic between the sisters. They sat side by side, as always exchanging fleeting glances but never speaking a word. When questioned, their responses were brief or non-existent, leaving their lawyers to do most of the talking. Ultimately, June and Jennifer were convicted of their crimes and sentenced to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility known for housing some of the most dangerous individuals in the country. But even as the legal system deemed them guilty, the true motive behind their actions remained shrouded in mystery. Were they rebelling against a society that had alienated them, Or was their behavior an extension of their strained, codependent relationship, each crime a manifestation of their internal conflict? The twins' silence left the world to speculate, but one thing was clear. Their bond, once a source of comfort, had now become a dangerous force. In their shared silence, they carried the weight of their secrets, leaving everyone to wonder whether their actions were born out of defiance, desperation, or something far darker. June and Jennifer Gibbons were sent to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility infamous for housing some of the most dangerous and disturbed individuals in the country. The sprawling institution, with its sterile white walls and regimented routines, was a stark contrast to the chaotic freedom the twins had once experienced. Inside Broadmoor, their silence persisted, but their behavior became even more unsettling. Doctors and nurses observed the twins moving in perfect synchronization, as if operating on an unspoken command. When separated for individual sessions, both June and Jennifer would enter a catatonic state, refusing to eat, drink, or respond to any stimuli. Yet, when reunited, their connection seemed to ignite. They would exchange glances, whisper in their private language, and occasionally burst into eerie, synchronized laughter. Staff members began documenting their behavior with a mix of fascination and unease. Some described their bond as almost supernatural, a phenomenon that defied explanation. One doctor noted that the twins seemed to exist as a single entity, their actions and emotions completely intertwined. Another speculated that their connection was so deep that it bordered on telepathy, though there was no scientific evidence to support such claims. The twins' presence at Broadmoor became a source of intrigue, but their confinement only seemed to deepen the mystery of their bond. What was clear to everyone who observed them was that their connection was far from ordinary. It was both their greatest strength and their most profound curse. As the years passed, the twins began to open up, if only slightly, to the staff at Broadmoor. In one particularly chilling session, Jennifer made a cryptic declaration that would haunt those who heard it. "One of us must die so the other can live." The statement was delivered with an unsettling calmness, as though it were a simple fact rather than a grim prophecy. When asked to elaborate, the twins offered no further explanation. Yet in their journals, the theme of sacrifice began to emerge repeatedly. Jennifer wrote of feeling as though June wanted her gone, while June expressed a similar sentiment about Jennifer. It was as if their bond had become so consuming that only death could release one of them. Doctors dismissed the statement as a reflection of their psychological struggles, a metaphor for their dependence on one another. But those closest to the twins couldn't shake the sense that the prophecy was more than just words. The certainty in their voices, the eerie finality of their tone, it left an impression that was impossible to ignore. What was driving this belief? Was it a manifestation of their mental state, or did the twins know something no one else could comprehend? In 1993, the chilling prophecy came true in the most inexplicable way. After over a decade at Broadmoor, the twins were finally approved for a transfer to a lower security facility. The move was supposed to mark the beginning of a new chapter, a chance for both June and Jennifer to start fresh. But as the day of the transfer arrived, something strange happened. Jennifer, who had shown no signs of illness, appeared unusually subdued. Her movements were sluggish, her gaze distant. She reportedly whispered to June, "I'm going to die," but no one took her words seriously. During the drive to the new facility, Jennifer slumped in her seat, unresponsive. By the time they arrived, she was pronounced dead. The medical report offered no clear cause of death. There was no injury, no apparent illness. Her heart had simply stopped. June later revealed that Jennifer had told her she was ready to sacrifice herself, believing it was the only way for June to live freely. "We've decided," June said, as though the choice had been mutual, inevitable. Jennifer's death left a haunting question in its wake. Was it a natural tragedy, a psychological phenomenon, or something beyond explanation? For June, the sacrifice marked the end of an era and the beginning of a life she had never lived before. After Jennifer's sudden and inexplicable death, the world waited with bated breath for June's reaction. To everyone's astonishment, she began to speak openly for the first time in her life. Her silence, which had once been impenetrable, gave way to words that carried an eerie weight. In a chilling admission, June claimed that Jennifer had chosen to die. "We've decided," she said, her voice calm and deliberate. According to June, it was a mutual decision born from an understanding that one of them had to make the ultimate sacrifice. Jennifer, she explained, had accepted this role willingly, believing it was the only way to free June from their shared imprisonment. This revelation left those who heard it deeply unsettled. What could drive such a decision? Why had Jennifer believed her death was necessary for June's survival? And perhaps most hauntingly, why did June seem so at peace with her sister's passing? Some speculated that Jennifer's death was the result of a psychological phenomenon, her mind and body simply shutting down after years of extreme dependency and strain. Others whispered about something more inexplicable, a supernatural connection between the twins that allowed Jennifer to will herself to die. For June, Jennifer's death marked the end of their shared existence and the beginning of a life she had never imagined. But the cost of that freedom was a burden she would carry forever. In the days and weeks following Jennifer's death, June underwent a startling transformation. For the first time in her life, she began to interact with the world around her. She spoke to doctors, nurses, and even strangers, offering insights into her life and her bond with Jennifer. It was as if a veil had been lifted. June started to write openly about her experiences, expressing emotions and thoughts that had been locked away for decades. She began to build relationships with others, finding a voice that had been stifled by her connection with Jennifer. Those who had known June and Jennifer as the silent twins were astounded by the change. The woman who had once seemed trapped in an impenetrable bubble now appeared almost liberated. But this newfound freedom came with its own set of challenges. June was now faced with the daunting task of living as an individual, a concept she had never fully embraced. Without Jennifer, she had to confront the world alone, carrying the weight of her sister's sacrifice. Could she truly leave behind the darkness of their shared past, or would it haunt her forever? Jennifer's death and June's transformation reignited debates about the nature of the twins' bond. Experts from various fields, psychology, psychiatry, and even parapsychology, delved into their story, hoping to uncover the truth behind their extraordinary connection. Many theorized that the twins' relationship was an extreme example of psychological dependency. Their isolation and shared language, coupled with the challenges of being one of the few black families in a predominantly white community, may have driven them to retreat into a world where they relied solely on each other. Others proposed the idea of twin telepathy, a phenomenon that remains largely anecdotal but has fascinated scientists for decades. Could June and Jennifer have shared a connection so deep that they communicated without words? And if so, was Jennifer's death a manifestation of that connection, a final act of telepathic agreement? Some researchers dismissed these theories altogether, suggesting that the twins' behavior was the result of untreated mental health issues. Their silence, isolation, and eventual criminal behavior could be seen as symptoms of a shared psychosis, a rare but documented condition where two closely bonded individuals share delusional beliefs. Yet, none of these explanations fully captured the complexity of the twins' relationship. Their story remains an enigma, defying easy answers and leaving even the most seasoned experts with more questions than conclusions. What was the true nature of their bond, and could it ever be fully understood by those outside their world? Long after their story faded from headlines, the writings of June and Jennifer Gibbons have continued to captivate and perplex those who seek to understand their bond. Scholars, psychologists, and literary critics have pored over the twins' journals, novels, and poems, searching for insights into their inner lives. Their fictional stories are dark, haunting, and filled with themes of jealousy, betrayal, and loss. Many of their protagonists mirror the twins' own struggles, portraying characters trapped in suffocating relationships or haunted by the fear of abandonment. One of Jennifer's stories recounts the tale of a boy controlled by an oppressive authority figure, mirroring her feelings of being dominated by June. Similarly, June's writings often featured characters who sought freedom but at great personal cost. These narratives paint a chilling picture of their psychological state. The twins seem to be grappling with an unbearable paradox. They were both terrified of separation and suffocated by their bond. Did they foresee the tragic end of their relationship in these stories? Were these fictional tales a warning or an unspoken cry for help? While their writing offers a glimpse into their minds, it raises just as many questions as it answers. Were the twins consciously processing their fears through their stories, or were they simply reflecting the reality of their shared torment? Jennifer's death left a trail of unanswered questions that continue to haunt those who delve into the twins' story. How could a healthy young woman die so suddenly with no clear medical cause? Was her passing a supernatural act of sacrifice, as June suggested, or a psychological phenomenon that science has yet to explain? Doctors speculated that Jennifer's death could have been caused by stress-induced cardiomyopathy, a rare condition where extreme emotional distress leads to heart failure. But even this explanation feels incomplete. The circumstances surrounding her death, her calm acceptance, the lack of warning signs, and her whispered premonition defy easy categorization. Beyond the physical mystery of her death lies a deeper, more existential question. What truly defined their bond? Was it a destructive codependency that Jennifer sought to escape? Or was it an otherworldly connection so intense that it demanded a life for its dissolution? Jennifer's death left the world with more questions than answers, ensuring that the story of the silent twins remains shrouded in mystery. Following Jennifer's death, June began to lead a life that many described as surprisingly normal. Freed from the intense codependency that had defined her existence, she started to speak more openly and engage with the world. She took on various jobs, built relationships, and even expressed a desire to put the past behind her. However, June rarely spoke about Jennifer or their shared experiences. When asked, she would offer brief, cryptic responses, as if unwilling or unable to fully confront the weight of their history. Friends and family noted that while June seemed to have moved on outwardly, there was a quiet sadness that lingered in her demeanor. In the quiet moments of her life, what memories of Jennifer haunted her? Did she replay their final days together, questioning whether Jennifer's death was truly inevitable? Or did she find solace in the belief that her sister's sacrifice had freed her to live the life they both had been denied? Years later, in rare interviews, June offered glimpses into her feelings about her sister and their extraordinary bond. "We loved each other too much," she once said, her voice tinged with a mix of sorrow and acceptance. She described their relationship as both a blessing and a curse, a connection that had given them unparalleled understanding of each other, but had also imprisoned them in a world where no one else could enter. "We were one person, but we couldn't both survive," June admitted. It was a sentiment that encapsulated the paradox of their bond, intensely loving yet tragically unsustainable. June's reflections serve as a poignant reminder of the complexities of human connection, raising the question of whether such intense relationships are ever truly sustainable in the long run. Despite decades of analysis, the story of the silent twins remains one of the most enigmatic cases in modern psychology. What truly caused Jennifer's death? Was it a psychological phenomenon, a supernatural event, or something entirely unknown? Equally puzzling is the nature of their bond. Was their connection simply the product of shared trauma and isolation, or was it something more extraordinary? Experts have explored countless theories, from twin telepathy to shared psychosis, but no single explanation fully captures the complexity of their relationship. Even June, the sole survivor, seems to carry the answers with her in silence. The case remains a haunting reminder of how little we understand about the depths of human connection. As we conclude the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons, the questions linger, unresolved and tantalizing. Was Jennifer's death an inevitable outcome of their extraordinary bond? Were the twins' lives a testament to the dangers of codependency or a glimpse into a connection beyond human understanding? The answers may never be fully known, but one thing is certain. The silent twins' story continues to fascinate and mystify, leaving each of us to ponder the profound complexities of love, individuality, and sacrifice. What do you think truly defined their bond, and could it have ended any other way? The verdict is yours to decide.